Welcome. My name is Kari Sotner. I'm president and CEO here at Eastern State. We are so happy to have you all here tonight, and this is going to be an amazing conversation. And I would like to welcome you here, but also just recognize that I feel like this conversation is bringing a lot of different people to the table to talk about these amazing places and spaces in our city, and quite frankly, around our country and around our world, and why we care about them. And so people are coming here because they love the architecture. People are coming here because they love the history. People are coming here because they want to save the stories that aren't being saved. They want to save the stories that aren't being told and hold on to them. And so we are going to do our best, and quite frankly, they are going to do their best to make sure that everybody walks away with a part of the story and the history and the understanding of why Philly saves what it does. And also to give that kind of moral, ethical, social construct of why we do the saving and the preservation and the restoration and the adaptation of these works in a way that applies to no matter what city you're in, no matter what town you're in, no matter what area you're in, it applies everywhere you go. So welcome. Big shoes to fill, you guys, but I know three of you can handle it. I've watched your work over decades, and it is unbelievably important what you do, and I am honored to have you three here. And so a little bit about Eastern State before we dive into it. Eastern State is a nonprofit organization, and the goal of Eastern State, our mission and our vision, is advancing the public understanding of the criminal justice system to ensure that the public understanding grows, but it grows with the understanding to advance a more just society. This is why we gather people here in center. We do this online, we do it in person, but this site was the site of criminal justice reform. It's the birthplace of criminal justice reform in America, but it's also the birthplace of solitary confinement, an institution designed to separate people from one another, to isolate people from one another, to break down community, to break down gathering together. So we believe it's really important to take this place and reuse it and adapt it and hold people in community together, to center community together, to work together to understand its past, to look forward to societal changes for us around criminal justice reform, around justice education, to do good with that, and to say, how do we make something different in the future? So taking this space, and as you can see, our type of preservation here is preserving this ruin in a way that is historic preservation style of a preserved ruin. And it's very important to us, but to reuse it to gather together for centering ourselves and our work. Now today, this whole entire year in Philadelphia is talking about the 250th, reflecting back and looking forward. And the work that we're doing is looking at democracy. It's looking at places and spaces in our past and our documents, but we're also really digging into what stories do we tell, how do we tell those stories, which ones get elevated and which ones get silenced. And as we dive into tonight's conversations, each one of you has chosen a path to take a place and preserve it in a different way, more than one place. And this is what we want to dive into. I first want to dive into understanding who you are, why you did the work that you're doing, and all of the legacy of the work that you're doing. Then we want to dive in a little bit deeper and talk about those sites of memory, those sites in some of the places that you've done that are sites of trauma, and how you've taken those sites of trauma to do good with those sites, to tell a story that we don't lose, because we need to hold on to all of our history, and that includes the hard history. And then also, what do we do with it in the future? Because it's not just the history that we save, it's the actions that we take in those sites, it's the civil discourse we have in those sites that makes it possible for us to have a future that is changeable, that is moving us forward. So all of these things matter. So a lot to layer through this, but at the end, we are going to have a little bit of Preservation 101. We're going to talk about, what does the word preservation mean? What does the word restoration mean? What does adaptive reuse mean? And really unpack that as well. Paul, we're going to lean on you hard for that part.
I'm ready.
But I do believe most of the work you two are doing are both fall in all those categories as well. So your examples will be perfect there. So without further ado, as we talk and walk into how do we preserve memory while creating new meaning and holding on to past meaning, let me introduce these three amazing panelists I keep telling you about. So, number one, can everybody please welcome Paul Stanke, who became the executive director of the Preservation Alliance for Greater Philadelphia in 2016. He's a passionate Philadelphian, committed to exploring ways to improve the quality of life and the image of one's nation's most vibrant cities. And yes, we can say that even if you're not from here. Philadelphia is one of the best cities, and because we're mostly all Philadelphians up here, right? Okay, it is the best city. And just so I'm sorry if you're from Boston, you can suck it. It is the best city. So Paul, it is the best city. Thank you for saving it. But it is an amazing city. And the work that he does with the Preservation Alliance of Greater Philadelphia is just unbelievably game-changing for this city. But the work continues to move forward in everything that he has done in his career. Civic and nonprofit leader spanning neighborhood revitalization, and we're gonna dive into what that was. Placemaking in shopping centers, ones that I know many of you have gone into and have loved. You make so many tourists happy every time they come to Philadelphia. Historic preservation, coalition building among businesses, among government and nonprofits. So much unbelievable work and the economic impact that goes along with preservation. And we cannot shy away from that. It is not just about doing the mission work. It's making sure that the economic impact grows, and that includes jobs, that includes growth of the community. All of this is the package around preservation. Can everybody please welcome Paul? Next, somebody who never sleeps. Catherine Level, you do not. I do not think you sleep. She is the president and CEO of the Philadelphia Visitor Center Corporation. She joined the Philadelphia Visitor Center in 2023, which feels like a lie. I feel like you've been there for a while. You have done so much so quickly, bringing significant leadership experience and service to the city of Philadelphia. Really unbelievably opening the doors to the city of Philadelphia to the world, making it the epicenter of so many people's visits, so many people's experience. But there's one thing you need to know about Catherine. She does not have one job. She has 32. So let me just give you a few more, because I'm not going to get them all listed. So she also is the head of Philadelphia 250th, the head of Philadelphia 250th Women's Committee, spearheaded the saving of the Philadelphia Light Show, which is literally a part of my childhood and my heart, the head of saving Dickens Village, which is a part of, adjacent to the Light Show, completely different but amazing, as well as the Belmont Mansion, as well as so many other pieces. And on top of that, was huge, unbelievably, the leader of the Commissioner of Philadelphia Parks and Recreations. You brought us Parks on Tap. You saved so many parks. You have brought us so many things to Fairmount Park Commission, was in mural arts, for years and years and years, have been serving Philadelphians in so many ways. Every single thing you do in Philadelphia, you touch a project that Catherine has brought you and has made Philadelphia a better city for it. Could please everybody welcome and thank Catherine. You really have. You do not get enough credit for how amazing you are. This lineup is three of my favorite people, if you can't tell already, but it's because for every right reason. And Michael Cord is a criminal defense attorney with more than 25 years of state and federal trial experience, specializes in murder cases, and worked at the Charles W. Bowser Law Center after serving as legal counsel for State Senator Hardy Williams. Yes, he received his degree in law at Ohio State University and his undergraduate degrees in English education and political science from Cheyney University. Michael is an unbelievable scholar of the Constitution, of Reconstruction. I have taught countless classes with him on the 14th Amendment, where both of us don't stop talking about the 14th Amendment for 3 hours, and most of our students have left, but they have learned a lot. We enjoy it. We have an amazing time. But Michael, I believe you were born an activist, and you were born an activist for ensuring that stories are told with the whole history and the entire history, to ensure that our country is not single-storied, that our country ensures that all voices are heard. You may know of a little story going on for the last 25 years in the news. You may have heard it, the story of the president's house. Anybody heard that one? Yeah. There is a person with many others, but a person that led that fight and has been fighting that fight for 25 years and started avenging the ancestors. This person who has continued that fight with the resistance and the resilience it takes in America and in so many other places in the world to ensure that our whole entire history is told. That person is Michael Cord. Could everybody please welcome and thank Michael? Now my job is done. You will hear from me almost nothing after this, but I'd like to dive into each one of you around this topic tonight and ask real quick questions. When we talk about these conversations, and Paul, I'll start with you. I'll go straight down the line on this first one. I really want to dive into, you saved and you revitalized Reading Terminal Market. You've done the work of the Preservation Alliance of Greater Philadelphia. You have done so many amazing projects, but tonight we're also talking about sites of memory, sites that are sites of trauma. Some of your other work you've done around Washington Avenue Immigration Station and saving sites of the American line of immigration stations where people have been detained and weren't allowed in our country. So can you talk a little bit about saving spaces and saving spaces that are not always the spaces that people people love Reading Terminal Market. They gather, they eat, they have fun, and that is an amazing place to save and an amazing place for people to have conversations and gather and be together. But we also have to save the places that people need to come together and gather for the hard stuff. Can you talk a little bit about both of those projects and why?
Sure. I guess I'll start by saying, where it's easier is a place like Reading Terminal Market that everybody loves. It did fall on hard times. It almost closed. The physical plant was shot, but it was brought all the way back. But everybody has to eat, right? Where it gets harder is places that people don't love. And a good example of that is Eastern State Penitentiary. There was a time when this place was unloved. It was a prison. It was a place of trauma. It was old and falling apart and then closed. And there were a lot of people who just thought it should be leveled, the site cleared, and redeveloped. And it was true believers in historic preservation and adaptive reuse who saw a new future for this place and saved it. So fast forward to today, we're in a similar kind of battle with another place that is unloved by many. Can anybody guess what that might be? That's a good one. I can talk about that one, the Norristown Erie Street Prison. But what's in my mind is the Police Administration Building, or the Roundhouse, down at 7th and Race. Probably the best standing example of a movement in architecture called the Philadelphia School, which reigned in this city and spread to other cities from the 50s into the 70s. And that building was built around 1962. Closed as a police station in 2023, and its future is very much in doubt. It's a solidly built building. It is eminently adaptable for new uses, but there's a big question. Given the trauma of what happened there, police brutality and oppression, is it worth saving for its architectural significance? Is it worth saving for the reason that Carrie said, which is as a place of memory, so we don't repeat those mistakes, so that we learn from them and not try to erase them. So we're coming down on the side, not surprisingly, we're the Preservation Alliance. We are part of a coalition that is making the case that that building should be restored, repurposed, adaptively reused for new uses that serve the community in ways that will help level the playing field or even the ledger of its history, while preserving the memory in a way that serves as a lesson to us all. We haven't won that battle yet. The city hasn't decided what they want to do with the building, and so you could be hearing soon that they want to demolish it, which we believe would be very sad and a waste of a good, well-built building. So that's a current example of one that's still on the bubble. We believe, and I'll stop here in a moment because I know other panelists need to speak, but we believe that if it does come down, future generations will look back on that as a great loss of a period of architecture and a type of building that we should have preserved, and we don't want that to happen for future generations.
Thank you. Catherine, I think the biggest movement that I saw this year in saving parts of history and saving the cultural fabric of who we are as American is the work that you did around the light show, is the work that I felt, quite frankly, that a lot of people gave up on. So first, for those who might not know what we're talking about, speak a little bit about what is the light show and what is Dickens Village. But that is this cultural phenomenon, but at the same time, people loved it and also at the same time forgot about it. But it was such a part of a fabric of a community, of a culture, and it was going to disappear. And you took it upon yourself to see that historical significance, to look at it and say, it's not just a building from 1776. It's not just an artifact from 1822. And you looked at it and you said, this is a place that people have come and had meaning making, and that is worth saving. That was a huge iconic moment for saving historic preservation. Could you talk a little bit about how you did that, why it mattered, and also how you galvanized not just corporations and organizations, but you galvanized individual people to care and to stand up and rise for it. It was really impressive to watch.
So, I wish I could say that it was this huge historic preservation effort. I do, Paul. I wish I could say that. But in all honesty, it's deeply personal for us as Philadelphians. And, as Philadelphians, I also find that we actually like to save stuff. It's like, it's part of our DNA, and so I have a sort of a crazy story about the light show, though, that I don't tell much, which is, it was part of my childhood. My dad, I grew up in Northeast Philadelphia. My dad would bring us down on the L every year. My dad loved free stuff. And anything, we would get on the L and we would come down to see the light show. Now, this was in 1980, right? I mean, there wasn't a lot happening downtown in 1980. Now in Philadelphia over the holidays, you can spend 3-4 days outside around the holidays and you still haven't done it all. But back then, you sort of went to see the light show, and the Dickens Village, and then you went home. And so we, got all dressed up, because that's what you did in 1980. We put on our holiday dresses, and we took the L, and we walked down Market Street. And I was 5 years old, and on our way down Market Street, my mom and my siblings were up ahead, and I was holding my dad's hand about 30 yards behind, and I felt my dad push me. And he said, run to your mother. And I have this core memory. I was 5 years old, but I start running, down Market Street screaming for my mom. He was being held up at knife point at like 10 o'clock in the morning, right? Back then, before ATMs, they stole everything he had in his pocket, which was our Christmas money. My mom talked about it till she died. It was a rough Christmas. So I ran to my mom. We spent the rest of the day in the police station, in like the 9th District, giving statements. And it was probably after lunchtime by the time we were leaving. And my mom said, okay, Fred, let's get home. And he said, oh, we're going to the light show. And my mom was like, she's got like a 5-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 7-year-old. She's like, what? And sure enough, we turned back around and we went to see that light show. And I don't tell that story much, but when I think about my core memory of the light show, it's certainly about the joy of me bringing my children to the light show every year since they've been alive. But I'd be lying if I didn't say some of that was that idea that my dad wanted to have that experience with us and was willing to make that experience happen at any cost, and was not willing that holiday to let that be our memory, right? And so, it was, so I think that's one example of, the way that these experiences in these places become very deeply personal to us. I think when we saw this whole thing play out around school closings, of course it's about the school, of course it's about the community, of course it's about the experience that these young people get, of course it's about the inequities, right, and the funding. This is all incredibly deeply personal to us as Philadelphians, and I think that is unique to us. I can't, I'm not a national scholar around this, but I think that it is something core to our identity as Philadelphians. And, about 12 years ago, I helped to save my high school. And that was a little known thing that I helped do in 2012, which is one of the things I'm most proud of. And for me, saving that high school was about the education I received, but it was also because it was the first place I was told I could be a leader. In sophomore year, 14 years old, my father had died the summer before, and I had no discernible talents. The principal at the time, pulled me aside, told me I was going to go to a leadership conference, and I asked her why, and she said, because I think you could be a great leader. And I remember taking the 70 bus home that day and thinking to myself, oh, that's my thing. I'm a leader. And so for me, saving this school, this all-girls school in Northeast Philadelphia, was about ensuring that future women are able to get that same message in my old neighborhood. And so again, I think historic preservation should be about architecture. It should be about the place, but it also has to be about the culture and the experience, and we have to think beyond the physicalness, the physicality of the buildings, and think about the spirituality and the emotion and the humanity that comes with it.
Thank you. And I think the idea of defining what is preservation is exactly what we need to do. It is what makes something worth saving. I think you just defined it perfectly there. That's preservation. And Michael, I think that it leads perfectly into you telling your story about not just saving a site, but which story you choose to tell there. So we can save a site all we want, but it is not just the saving of a place. It's the story that you choose to tell at that place matters so much. That's the work that you started 24 years ago. And now, today, just this week, it was put on the National Trust for Historic Preservation's list. This feels a little backwards, but it's the most endangered list. I know, and I'm like, but it's a good thing, so you should be clapping. But like this, it's you refused to allow the same old story to be told. So please tell us that story.
I love the way you framed that question, because it's not only about telling the story, but telling the story from the standpoint of people who normally you don't hear from. When we talk about the issue of slavery, we talk about the issue of race and racism, far too often in America, we start with slavery, as if black people did nothing before slavery. If you look at the clock of human existence, humans first walked this planet about 200,000 years ago. And the reason why we know that's true is not only because the great Dr. Molefe Asante, chairman of the Africology department at Temple University, said it, but Louis Leakey said it. And he's a white guy, so we gotta believe him. So if this great white European British archaeologist says that the existence of human beings began 200,000 years ago in the Nile Valley region of East Africa, think about that. So the first human being 200,000 years ago in Africa. And what comes out of Africa? Algebra and geometry and calculus and monotheism. And by the way, Egypt is in North Africa, not in the Middle East. So when we talk about the pyramids, it's really interesting because when the American educational system had to concede that Egyptians created the pyramids and Egypt is in Africa, and Africa is where black people live, black people came up with the pyramids. It got so bad now that folks are saying that the Martians did it. Rather than give it to the Africans, they give it to the Martians. Where am I going with this? I always have to start at the beginning, because far too often we talk about the issue of race, racism, and slavery. It appears that black people had no story to tell before then. But we were doing our own thing before the Europeans arrived. So if you look at the clock of human existence, that's 200,000 years ago. Africa, the motherland, the cradle of civilization, where the first human beings lived. That's 200,000 years ago. Fast forward to 1619. Slavery in America existed from 1619 to 1865. That's 246 years. Damn it, let's talk about what happened those other 200,000 years. Because if you start with slavery, it appears that that's our story. Now, that story must be told, but you always have to start from the beginning. Why must the story of slavery be told? It has to be told because black people in America today are on the bottom of almost every list: education, income, employment. We're at the bottom. We're at the bottom for one of two reasons. One, we're genetically predisposed to be there, or two, there are societal implications. It's one or the other. And clearly, it can't be genetically predisposed because we came up with algebra and calculus and geometry and the pyramids. So something happened. And those 246 years explained what happened and why we are where we are. Here's the thing about the site that we were talking about at 6th and Market. It's called the President's House. My organization is called ATTAC, A-T-A-C, Avenging the Ancestors Coalition. And often people think that avenge and revenge are synonymous. They are not. Revenge means do the same bad thing to you that you did to me. Avenge is to demand justice for the victims of that wrongdoing. So how do we demand justice? That goes right to your question. We demand justice by speaking for those who can't speak. We demand justice by telling their story. Everybody who knows about George Washington knows about this the guy that chopped down the cherry tree and never told a lie. Why do they know that myth but don't know that he enslaved 316 black men, women, and children? How come they don't know that he illegally held 9 of those 316 right here in Philadelphia at America's first White House? How come that story hasn't been told? People who know me and follow me here in Philadelphia, my radio show and my newspaper column, they call me the angriest black man in America. Correction, I call myself the angriest black man in America, and they follow the lead. And that line came from the great James Baldwin. James Baldwin, in paraphrasing, said, "To be black and conscious in America is to be in a constant state of rage." You can't be black in America and know about slavery and not be enraged. You can't be black in America and know about sharecropping and convict leasing and lynching and Jim Crow and mass incarceration and redlining and gerrymandering. By the way, let me digress for 30 seconds because people don't know me. When they hear me talking about the issue of race and racism, they're like, come on, Mike, this is 2026. We're in a post-racial environment. It's a multicultural thing. Everything's good. We elected your black guy president twice, so it's all good here in America. No, it's not. And people say, well, why do you say that? I say, well, here's a question for you. In 2026, if today you had to go to court as a defendant in any criminal case, everything equal, employment, income, clothing, religion, everything equal, but you had the choice to go in as a defendant as a black person or a white person in America today. Nobody with brains would voluntarily go in to a courtroom as a black defendant if they could go in as a white defendant. There's a reason for that. If you're at Temple University, it's 3 o'clock in the morning, you're driving up Broad Street and lights and sirens from a police car come up behind you. And as that police officer approaches your car, you could be a black driver or a white driver. In 2026, which would you select? You know the answer. So the issue of race and racism has to be talked about. And by the way, I haven't really begun to answer the question yet, but I'll get there. I'll get there. I'll get there, and give me 2 minutes. And here's the thing about the 6th and Market Street site. It's a very long story. It'd take me 2 hours to tell you, but let me do it in 2 minutes. 2002, there's a newspaper article indicating that the Liberty Bell Center, then at 5th and Market, was going to move to 6th and Market. Okay, interesting, but I don't really care about that. Second thing, 2002, the new site of the Liberty Bell Center, 6th and Market, is where America's first White House stood. Back in 1790, it was called the Executive Mansion, the Robert Morris Mansion, the President's House, but it served as America's first White House. I'm hearing that, but I'm not really interested in it. But then the third thing I find, I remember, 1, Liberty Bell Center moves, 2, 6th and Market, America's first White House, but 3, George Washington enslaved black men, women, and children there. I was enraged because I was born and raised in Philly. Never heard that story. I went to arguably the best school in the country, Masterman. Never heard that story. I went to the oldest HBCU, Cheney University. Never heard that story. I went to the largest university in America for law school, Ohio State. Never heard that story. I was outraged, and that's where the storytelling came in. So we find out about these 9 enslaved African descendants at 6th and Market, and we want to tell their story. And want to tell their story to the point where people understand why this is important. And here's why it's important. I know I said 2 minutes 5 minutes ago, but I really mean it this time, 2 minutes. Here's the thing. We're on the eve of the 250th anniversary of the birth of this country. And this country is a prosperous country. You can argue if you want, it's a great country. But how did it become prosperous? If you had a company and for 246 years, you didn't have to pay your employees a dime, you'd have a prosperous company. America is that company. When people talk about celebrating the 250th, they have to celebrate what made this country what it is. If you claim on the eve of the 250th that you're this great patriot, if you claim that you love this country, you have to understand this. You can't truly love something unless you know it. You might love your husband, your wife, your significant other because he, she, or they brings you roses every morning. But you didn't know that they were a serial killer at night. So you need to know the good, the bad, and the ugly. Those stories have to be told. You can tell the story of the good. The founding fathers fought against tyranny, Great Britain, taxation without representation. That's a good story, tell that. But also, what about the bad? The mistreatment of women. That story has to be told. And what about the ugly? The genocide of our red brothers and sisters and the enslavement of the black ones. So storytelling is critically important to telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you.
And he is winning an award tonight from the NAACP in Delaware as well.
And I actually have to run off stage soon to get to it.
He does. So we're going to get to questions in a minute. We're going to do a real quick speed round on this, and then we'll dive in. Paul, quick, just to make sure as we talked about this conversation, and all three of you have layered that so perfectly, talking about how, looking at the site, how do you save sites? Looking at what do you save with Catherine, looking at how do you tell a story and which story do you choose. Paul, can you start us off with really understanding when we're looking at a site and really thinking through how do you preserve a site? How do you restore a site? What is adaptive reuse? Looking at those three terms, and I know that there's a layering of those terms, no pun intended to say that at Eastern State with all of our layers, but could you help us kind of frame those conversations? Because as we talk through this, there's layers of interpretation and how we do this work in every aspect of this work, but give us that kind of foundational framing for the whole of the audience in this field.
Sure, and before I do that, let me just follow up on what Michael just talked about by saying we were all three down at 6th and Market today to commemorate the memory of one of those 9 enslaved individuals at the President's House site, and that was Ona Judge. who escaped on this date in 1796 from the President's House site, and despite the Washington's best effort, was never captured. And so, and Michael told me he's been commemorating this day for 20 years.
23 years.
23 years. It took another step up today. Catherine hosted a commemorative event at the Visitor Center today. And so little by little, we're trying to raise up the memory of Ona Judge as an inspiration and as a way to tell the story of what happened at the President's House site. So happy Ona Judge Day. So go ahead.
And I just wanted to add to the Ona Judge story. It was partially because Philadelphia was so good at hiding people and be able to gather people in and to hide within Philadelphia, the community of Philadelphia. And when you talk about in spite of George Washington's best efforts, meaning his money and his constant pursuit of sending people to go after her all the way to Canada. So we are talking about years and years of aggressive tracking and headhunting, literally, with people trying to go after to get her back. But Philadelphia began to protect her, and she took her life in her hands to get away and to do that. So thank you for bringing that up, and thank you three for making sure her story is told.
So to get to your question, preservation, there's a technical answer, which is architects, engineers, conservators, the people who, roofers, carpenters, all the trades and the skills that go into making building buildings, maintaining buildings, and restoring buildings when they deteriorate. So there's that aspect of preservation. But preservation also operates in a capitalist society, a society that is driven by the profit motive, a society where developers have a lot of power, and some of that power can be and is used to restore historic buildings, but it also is sometimes used to eliminate historic buildings to build new. So preservation, in a way, is swimming with the sharks, kind of with one arm tied behind our backs, because historic preservation as a movement doesn't have the money and the power of the real estate development industry. So there is that. As far as restoration, it's taking a building that has deteriorated and bringing it back to a good condition. It doesn't always have to be perfection, but serviceable, passes inspections, gets a certificate of occupancy, and can be used again. And adaptive reuse, I'll give you 3 examples. There's a former parking garage at 22nd and Pine Streets, built in the 1920s. It's now a school, a Goddard school. There is a school in South Philly called Bach. Raise your hand if you've been there. If you haven't, it's now a commercial building with 200 small businesses and a handful of restaurants and a great rooftop bar that turned a school into a commercial building. And then there are commercial buildings like factories and mills, of which Philadelphia, the one-time workshop of the world, has hundreds that get turned into residential buildings, apartments, market rate apartments for people who can afford them, but there's a whole segment of affordable apartments, especially special needs, residential buildings for people recovering from opioid addiction, former veterans, homeless people, and so forth. So preservation runs the gamut of all of that, and adaptive reuse is the magic that turns these buildings that were built for something else into something that serves today's society in a way with materials and craftsmanship and durability that cannot be duplicated today. And that's a big reason why preservation is so important, along with, as Catherine was saying, preserving the memory and the emotion that those buildings embody. So preservation is really a noble cause, but it sometimes gets put to the wayside by the profit motive in the real estate development world.
Thank you. You're very good at your job. Catherine, could you tell us a little bit about the Belmont Mansion? This is a powerful project. and it really should be well known across this country.
Yeah, so it's a restoration project. Paul's description was spot on in terms of what we're trying to do at Belmont. So Carrie mentioned the Philadelphia 250, and Philadelphia 250 has a women's committee for the 250th, which is carrying on a tradition of women who have come together around centennial exhibitions going back, around centennial celebrations going back to 1876, the centennial exhibition, which was the World's Fair, right, of first one in the country. 10 million of our people came to that, which was a quarter of our country's population at the time, right? There was a woman named Elizabeth Duane Gillespie, great-granddaughter of Ben Franklin, who wanted to do a women's exhibit in the main exhibition hall of the Centennial Exhibition. And she was told by the men, sorry guys, that, you know, of course not, she can't exhibit there because, well, what would you exhibit? And I'm paraphrasing. And so she raised the equivalent of almost $1 million in today's dollars over the course of a few months to build a women's pavilion, her own women's pavilion at the Centennial, which showcased the accomplishments of women in arts and culture and science and education. And think about it, for women in 1876 to come to Philadelphia and to be able to go into a building and to see, you know, 74 patents that had been won by women, right, in the year 1876. This was like mind-blowing, right? It became one of the most visited attractions at the Centennial Exhibition. Fast forward to 1926, a group of women come together to restore Strawberry Mansion in Fairmount Park. 1976, a group of women come together to restore Laurel Hill Mansion. So in 2026, we formed a women's committee, and we have about 300 women who've all donated to be a part of this committee. Anybody can join. It's $250. And we decided to have two legacy projects. One, a programmatic legacy, which we just completed last week, which was a women's pitch competition for women small businesses with WORC. So we gave them a grant, and we did this really amazing pitch competition and gave out $75,000 in awards to small businesses owned by women. And then we decided to do a physical legacy project, which is the restoration of the Belmont Mansion and Underground Railroad Museum in West Fairmount Park, which is architecturally an outstanding, help me Paul, exquisite example of Palladium architecture, one of the best in the country. But that aside, it is also has this incredible colonial history. George Washington, Marquis de Lafayette, these people, Ben Franklin, they visited and they stayed there, right? And the most amazing part about it is that in 1986, this building was slated for demolition, right? And there was a woman named Audrey Thornton, just a regular old woman, she wasn't old then, regular Philadelphian, who was driving by one day, sees that this building is going to come down, and takes it upon herself to save Belmont Mansion, okay? A black woman. Rallies her community, other black women, creates an organization called the American Women's Heritage Society in 1986, okay, with a family at home. And she saves that building. She raised the funds to save Belmont Mansion. And over the years, you know, it becomes a hub, you know, an incredibly beloved hub for African-American communities, specifically African-American women. And Audrey passes away in 2019. We now have the next generation, her daughter, Dr. Naomi Booker, and her granddaughter, Lonnie Booker White, who have taken on, are holding the torch now to continue to steward Belmont Mansion. But Belmont Mansion remains back up. Audrey discovered during that time in the 1990s, she did research on the mansion and realized that it was a stop on the Underground Railroad, right? And she's the first to discover this. And believe me when I say, as someone who ran the Parks and Recreation Department, there are people out there who deny, right, that it ever was a stop on the Underground Railroad. But it was, and we have the research to prove it, right? Audrey did that research. Her granddaughter codified all of that research. And so for Audrey, this became not just, you know, maintaining this incredible, you know, historic mansion in the park, but it became about telling the story. And so she created an Underground Railroad Museum in this mansion. Audrey passed away in 2019. The mansion is in a ton of need. So we've done a whole audit of the needs of the mansion. We have one of the best exhibit design firms in the country, Ralph Applebaum Associates, who have done a concept design for a new Underground Railroad Museum. We just raised the funds. We've raised almost $500,000 already to do a complete planning and design phase to completely restore the mansion and the museum. And it's going to be a legacy project that comes out of 2026. So it is the only historic house in Fairmount Park, and there are over, oh my gosh, there's dozens and dozens of them. The only one that's stewarded by 3 generations of African American women. So a critical asset and an amazing story to be told. It will become a destination. It will become a destination. We will bring people to the city, and they will make it a point to go to Belmont Mansion. It also has the single best view of the city of Philadelphia skyline in the city of Philadelphia. It literally sits on top of the plateau. So it is the money shot, and it's just a really exciting project. But we need a lot of support. So continue to spread the word.
Excellent, wonderful, and beautiful, absolutely beautiful inside and out. Michael, your work is not done. You made that list, but it's the most dangerous list to be on in a way. What do you need from our city, from our audience, and from our country?
Thank you for asking that. It actually is an honor to be on that list. And what I mean by that is, in America, truth-telling makes you the bad guy. So when you talk about the real history, you're going to be attacked. And, pardon the pun, you're going to be attacked, and that's why that site was. Here's the interesting thing, and that's why I say that I'm honored, I'm impressed, I'm truly pleased that it's on the list, and here's the context. Back in January of 2025, the guy in the White House issued dozens and dozens of executive orders. Every single one was anti-black. Anti-black in terms of anti-DEI, anti-critical race theory, anti-affirmative action. So we knew what was coming. This is January 2025. Fast forward to March of 2025, when he says, hey, I'm looking around the country, and I'm seeing all these federal historical sites, and I don't like what many of them say because they don't promote white supremacy enough. And what I mean by that, his exact words were, he doesn't like certain sites because they, quote, inappropriately disparage Americans past and living, unquote. Inappropriately disparaged. This is in March of 2025. Fast forward to May of 2025. He gets his Interior Department secretary guy by the name of Doug Burgum to target 6th and Market, President's House, Slave Memorial, and say this site should be shut down within 120 days. That was in May of 2025. 120 days took us to September 17. September 17 comes and goes, nothing happens. October, November, December, and then January 22 of 2026 at 2:57 p.m., he sends vandals from DC to come to 6th and Market and completely desecrate the site using large crowbars to rip off the walls all the information about the site. We call them interpretive panels. There were 34 interpretive panels that told the story of that site. He had all that stuff ripped off the wall. So when we talk about endangered sites, for us, that was like number 1 on the list. But here's why I say it's basically a badge of honor. Because when he made the announcement through his Interior Department secretary in May, he poked a sleeping bear. A lot of folks in Philly, they walk by 6th and Market, but okay, no big deal, some stuff going on here. But when they found out what it represented, all of a sudden now people became enraged. Remember, TAC started in 2002 as a group of angry black folks from the hood. What the guy, and that's, by the way, angry black folks from the hood who are crazy revolutionaries, and I plead guilty to all of the above, all of the above. So what happened is when he made that announcement in May to potentially shut down the site, all of a sudden we get a bunch of folks who really didn't care about the site. There's white folks and black folks. There are Jews and Muslims. There's straight and gay. There's young and old. There's blue collar and white. He did a better recruiting job for us than we could have ever done for ourselves. So the fact that that happened, now we're at a situation where following his desecration of that site on January 22 of 2026, got to give a big shout out to Mayor Sherelle Parker because her law department filed a lawsuit. And I'm not going to bore you with the details of what it's all about, but basically it was a preliminary injunction. And a preliminary injunction is where you're asking a judge to force somebody to do something or to stop doing something. And the law department of the city had a great legal argument focused on the Administrative Procedures Act of 1946, which basically says this: hey, in situations like this, before the federal government can take any action against the site, they must consult with the city. Before the city can take any action against the site, they must discuss it and consult with the feds. Well, on January 22 from the White House, there was no consultation. They just came in and ripped the stuff off. What happened after that was just mind-boggling. After the city filed this lawsuit, we came in, tax attorneys, and we have some of the best lawyers in the city. We have Professor Kara McClellan, Esquire of University of Penn Law School. We got the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. We have a currently unnamed, big-time, white-collar law firm. So we got an army of attorneys, and what we did is we filed a friend of the court brief, an amicus brief. But here's what we did. We joined in the great arguments by the city, but we wanted to expand and go beyond that. So about a month ago, we filed something called a motion to intervene. What does that mean? That means not only do we stand shoulder to shoulder with the city, but we want to expand their lawsuit. We want to expand and go beyond the Administrative Procedures Act. We want to talk about race. We want to talk about racism. We want to talk about slavery, because that's what happened there. This action that was taken was not taken in order to breach a contract. It was to attack black people. That's exactly what it was for. So we expanded that, and to our shock and amazement, when the case went to federal district court and went in front of a white, female, Republican judge, and when we heard the Republican part, we're like, oh shit, sorry, well, oh, whatever, anyway. But here's what happened. That judge, anytime a judge doesn't let a lawyer get a word in edgewise, that's a bad sign. Because as soon as the lawyers for Trump got up and started arguing about, hey, the feds own the site and the feds have the legal authority to do what they did. And the judge basically says to them this: let's say hypothetically the feds do own the site. Let's say hypothetically they had the legal right to take the stuff down. Why would you want to do that? If you're arguing to me that the information at the site is wrong, make that argument. If you want to make the argument that all the stuff about George Washington enslaving people is false, make that argument. But you're conceding that, and nonetheless, you're stripping all the information off the wall. That judge wrote an opinion that was like a Hollywood movie script. It was legally sound, it was factually solid, but she weaved in George Orwell's 1984. And she talked about the Ministry of Truth, a government entity that claims to tell the truth, but promotes lies. Remember, this is a Republican-appointed judge. And she issued this order, and basically, we won. But the feds filed a lawsuit from the district court to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. And when they filed the appeal, we noticed that they only filed an appeal up to the Third Circuit. Anytime you appeal on the federal level, it's got to be a 1-2 punch. You file your notice of appeal, and then you seek a stay of the lower court's order. Well, they filed the appeal, but never sought a stay. So Judge Roof said, okay, you filed the appeal, but put the shit back up because you never asked for a stay. And a group of lawyers in my office, we were debating, like, strategically, why would they not seek a stay? And one of the lawyers in my office said, Mike, you're missing the point. They're not rocket scientists. The lawyers for the federal government, before, even with the Republicans, they had qualified attorneys. Now they got hacks. They didn't know they were supposed to seek a stay. So That's why of the 34 that were taken down, 16 were put back up. But somebody in the Fed said, maybe we should seek the stay. So they finally sought the stay at 16. Third Circuit said, okay, you got 16, stop it right there. And that's what they did. So right now, 16 of the 34 are back. We go back to court on June 2nd to expand the argument and have an oral argument. But the bottom line is this. Frederick Douglass said it best. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. We are fighting the most powerful man on the planet, and we started out as some mostly blue-collar, angry black activists from the hood. We fought this man, and we won in the district court and are winning in the Third Circuit. You ask, what can you all do? All that stuff I just said, you can disregard that, because now I'm going to get to the real point. The real point is we need you to become a part of our movement. We need you to become a member of Avenging the Ancestors Coalition. And we jokingly, but actually seriously say, we welcome white folks to join our movement as long as they sign a form saying that they are descendants of John Brown. Whether that's true or false, just say it. And once you say it, you're in. So right now, we just need you to join ATTACK. Go to our website, avengingtheancestors.com. That's avengingtheancestors.com, and you'll be a member. You can help us fight the good fight. The next action that we'll engage in is going into the Third Circuit, and it's an open courtroom to the public. So if you go to that website and sign on, we'll tell you the exact time, exact courtroom. You can join us and hear history being made. avengingtheancestors.com. Thank you.
I just want to say too that was probably the best synopsis of democracy at work. I mean, and that is to me like, I mean, just hearing you talk about it, Michael. First of all, about the judge, there are patriots among us. Yes. There are patriots among us, and that's number one. And number two, democracy works. And when my oldest daughter, when Trump was first elected the first time, I'm sorry to get political, feels like a political crowd anyway. When he was first elected, my daughter was like in middle school at the time, and what was that, 2016? Help me. Yeah. Okay. And I will never forget the moment of having to go into her room the morning after I brought her into the voting booth with me to vote for the first female president, right? And then that juxtaposition of having to go in her room the next morning to wake her up to tell her this news, right? That this evil man, right, was, and I my husband and I sat in the hallway, discussed how we were going to do this, went in and told her, and she said, "Mommy, what happens now?" And I remember viscerally reacting and saying, "Democracy happens now, honey, and you're not going to totally understand that yet, but it is strong and it is precious." And I've talked about this so much because I myself, and I know this is what you wanted to talk about, Kara, but I myself, struggle on the daily of, planning an anniversary party, when mom and dad seem headed for divorce, right? Like that's what it feels on the daily. And the way that I, put my head on the pillow at night is by reminding myself that there is a reason for this semi-quincentennial season that we are in, right? It's like there's a reason for the holiday season that if you're Christian, there is a reason for this season, right? And we have to remember that is what we are celebrating. We are not celebrating the document that was signed by the dead white guys. We are celebrating this very precious experiment that even they admitted was imperfect and bold and innovative, right? They use the word imperfect. It was imperfect, right? But it is not a document. It is all of us, right? It is each person in that story Michael just told, right? So.
Thank you. We're going to go to questions, but we talked about this last night at a program, and I'll say it again. There is that amazing, speech by MLK. We always hear it. We always hear that line. The arc of a moral universe bends towards justice. I never like when people end at that line, because that's actually not what he was saying. That's a falsehood when you only hear that line, because it sounds like everything's getting better. And that's not. When you look at history, it's nowhere near an arc of niceness. It's not like it's always getting better. That's like a falseness we tell ourselves. Most of the time, it's a really ugly zigzag. And right now, it feels like a really hard right turn and left turns all along the way. And the speech is really the arc of a moral universe bends toward justice. And paraphrasing here is when you pull it that way. And so what we never, looking at Michael and all the work that you do and all the work that he is asking for help to do, and Judge Roof and all that she is doing through the Constitution, no matter what side you're on, but on the Constitution side, and the work that you do and that your daughter does, that we look towards where is the effort we put in to have a more just society, a more just future, and ensuring that we claim spaces and we claim societies and we claim our country to understand how do we take the wrongs and ensure that we create place and space to do the rights. So thank you all for being here for this. Thank you, panelists, for being here for this conversation. I want to give them one big more round of applause before we go to questions. Michael has to go get his award. It's 7:01. Do you need to leave now?
9 minutes.
Okay, do not get a speeding ticket because of me. Okay, we'll start. Questions for the panel. And our team is around here somewhere. There, okay, there we go. If you have a question, our team will come over. They will hold the mic. We've learned our lesson, giving the mic over, and so they will hold the mic. Thank you, Nathan. He's seen it. If you have a question, just raise your hand, and we'll come over to you. No questions? Okay, oh, there we go. Come on.
Oh, you're gonna hold it. Oh, you can't. Okay, you're not allowed. Okay, well, I'll lean over. Actually, I can. Okay, that's fine. So thank you. This is a question for Paul about the police administration building, because I ride by it every day on Race Street on my bike, and I've been wondering about it because I keep looking, and I'm not an architectural historian or anything, but I can tell that it's an interesting and important building that I grew up with, and now it's, in its demise. So what the question is, what are the factors that are at play in its future? Is it that the city would be expected to pay for it, to restore it, or what's the city waiting to decide about? What are the factors that go into their thinking about it? And if you came along and raised the money, I guess it's owned by the city, right?
Yes.
So do they just want to do something else with it, and that would be more economically advantageous? That's the kind of...
I don't know all the answers, but I can speculate about some. One is that this administration has been focused on housing development as their main issue, and has really not been focused that much on redeveloping city-owned property. So there's the family court at 18th and Vine that's sitting vacant. There's the former Atwater Kent Museum at 7th and Market sitting there vacant. There's the Roundhouse sitting there vacant. They're just not paying attention, at least doesn't look like they're paying attention. That said, it is a large site. It's 7 acres. It's city-owned. What the other administrations have done by this stage of their life cycle is bring in a quasi-city agency called Philadelphia Industrial Development Corporation, have them put out a request for proposals for redevelopment, and then review them, put whatever criteria or guardrails they want on what goes there, and then select a developer to redevelop. That's what happened at the Navy Yard. That's what happened 50 years ago with the old Philadelphia General Hospital site, which is now CHOP and HUP in West Philly. But this administration, just for whatever reason, has not gone down that path. The other thing I'll say about that building that was of great disappointment to us is that we were part of a coalition that tried to get it listed on the Philadelphia Register of Historic Places, which would have given it some protections from demolition. And the Historical Commission, which governs that register, voted 7-6 not to designate. and that was in the fall of 2022 or 3. So the city itself decided not to regulate itself on a building that they own, preserving maximum flexibility for the site's future. So don't really know the full answer to your question. We're waiting for the other shoe to drop.
One question up here.
Hi, thank you. My name is Tyler. I was a little curious about the existence of Avenging the Ancestors Coalition. Was it created by you, or was it already like pre-existing before you were born?
Great question. The answer is both. I decided in June of Why didn't I use the mic from the beginning? The answer is both. I decided in June of 2002, when I heard the story about the site, to do something to avenge our ancestors. But in the African tradition, we don't believe in reinventing the wheel. We get it from somebody else. So my African-centered consciousness came in 1976 when I saw Alex Haley's Roots. And that's when I realized, wow, black people did stuff before slavery. So from my standpoint, I'd like to say, yeah, the great Michael Cord came up with it, which by the way is true. But apart from that, I got that message from somewhere else. And that message came from the ancestors. And very quickly, for example, what we're doing now, this activist movement, this litigation movement, came from the elders and ancestors from the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s. They had this great strategic approach. It was always two-pronged. It was to send activists in the streets to raise hell, send attorneys into the courtrooms to raise issues. So that's what we did, and that's how we became Avenging the Ancestors Coalition. Great question.
Great question. One more question before we wrap? No? Oh, there's a hand in the back. One last one, and then we will wrap. Oh, student, and then two more. Okay.
This is for Miss Catherine. You talked a little about parks and recreation, and it made me think about my park and how I volunteered. And I wanted to know, what does preservation mean in specific to parks when it comes to the people who live in the neighborhoods?
My gosh. What is your name? Chikaya. What school are you in? Good for you. Is this your teacher? This is awesome. First of all, round of applause. You guys, that is so awesome. And what an excellent question. Yeah, I was the Parks and Rec Commissioner for about 8 years. And, you know, it's really interesting. I could talk for hours about this. What does preservation mean when it comes to parks and public spaces? Well, first of all, there's a tremendous amount of history in parks. And parks were created for different reasons. I first met Michael Cord, he may or may not remember this, with a project before I was at Parks and Rec, actually, that called Wekiko Park, which was actually a burial ground of the Mother Bethel Church that was sold by the church to the city, and the city turned it into a playground. And there was a historian that discovered this years later, right, that there were actually thousands of graves.
5,000.
5,000, right, for deceased black folks underground, right? And essentially, and I remember sitting in meetings with Michael where, as the angriest black man would say...
I didn't drop the F-bomb, did I?
No, you did not. But he clearly said, and I remember, like, you know, at that point I worked for the Fairmount Park Conservancy, saying, you know, there was a building over this, and there was toilets that were literally flushing, you know, onto these graves, you know, and it really, it's such a core memory for me, because I remember thinking, like, oh my God, this guy is right, you know, like it's desecrating, right? And so the attack actually had a movement then to reclaim this space and create a memorial there, right? You know, where the graves were, right? The rest of it is available for passive play, but this area is a memorial. And so that to me is a really great example of how preservation can play out in open space as well, right? And then, you know, I could also talk for hours. There's a lot of during my time at Parks and Rec, there was a ton of discussion around, how that passive space is preserved, right? Is it, and there's a battle out there that I was in the thick of for quite a few years, don't miss it, around, passive recreation versus active recreation. And, people that believe, passive recreation, which is, woods and meadows and forests, is better or more important, and I'm just using words, right, than active recreation, playing fields and courts and things. And so there was this whole, dichotomy that existed throughout my time at Parks and Rec as the commissioner, to have to make really hard decisions about how that space is utilized, and always having to keep front of mind what is in the highest and best interest of Philadelphians, right? And so an incredible challenge. I don't think people often give people in city government enough credit, that, there are incredibly hard decisions that people have to make every day that take, have to consider preservation, but also have to consider the needs of, and the needs of a big poor city, and the needs of young people in that city. And I would always say, in this famous line of, that I've heard a million times, but rang true for me every day, don't criticize my decisions unless you know the choices I had, and I think that that's really important for people to understand when they're criticizing people in city government. First of all, take your turn. If you're going to criticize people in city government, take your turn first and then criticize, okay, people? Number one. Number two, remember, you don't know the choices that people have, and I think, but everybody should take a turn in city government. So, yeah, I hope that answers some of your question. And good for you. What's your park? What park? Yeah. 8th and Diamond. Do you know Dana Clark? Do you know Dana? Yes, tell him I said hi, would you? Yeah, he's an amazing, amazing rec leader. Cheney, basketball player, actually. Yeah, amazing. Good for you. Tell him I said hi.
I love Philadelphia. Last question.
Hello, my name's Austin. I guess my question for you is, how did you come to the realization that this was your calling, and what was that part of your life like when you made that decision?
Me? Oh,
Yeah. We can do the last speed round, all three of you.
yeah. I'll defer to Paul first.
Well, I'll try and make it quick, but I grew up in a family where both my grandmother on my mother's side and my father were already in love with the city that they grew up in and shared that with me. I used to beg my father to drive me to the ends of the streets in my neighborhood, and he would do it on Saturdays. He would take me to the end of Castor Avenue down on the Delaware River, where there were the ships and the boxcars in the middle of the street. I just was fascinated by the city from a young age, learning from them. And that was the beginning of my obsession with Philadelphia.
I too am obsessed.
And I also grew up in the Northeast.
Amen. Northeast in the house. I think I also was born with an irrational love for Philadelphia. I can't explain it any other way. I always wanted to work in city government, and once I did that, I realized that it's probably not forever. But truth be told, about 15 or 20 years ago, I was on a beach with my husband, and we're having that conversation that spouses sometimes have, and the question he posed to me was, hey, if you could have any job, what's the job, right? And I had a visceral response. I was like, oh, I want to run the visitor center. And my husband was like, that is so specific, and random. I was like, yeah, no, if that guy retires, that's my job. That's my job. And so, and so then, fast forward 15 years, and a search firm calls me, and they're like, we are in we're representing this organization. We want to know if you do have any interest in being the president and CEO of the Philadelphia Visitor Center. I was like, I have been waiting for you, and in all honesty, it's because, I never really worked in tourism before, but I love the idea of being able to welcome people to my city, and I love hospitality. Halloween's my favorite holiday, right? I love hospitality. I love welcoming people. I love, connecting people to authentic Philadelphia experiences. I love showing off our city. I love talking about it. I love, and believe me, I understand what's wrong with it. No one has to tell me I understand what's wrong with it, right? I love it unconditionally, right? And I want to promote it, and I want people to feel that love, right? And to get to know our city through its people and our places and our experiences, and I get to do that every day, and it's a dream.
A round of applause for that. That's a great question you posed, by the way, and I was thinking, I wasn't being polite by deferring to Paul. I was trying to give myself time to think of the best answer. So that's exactly why I did that. In all seriousness, I'd love to say that I chose this thing, but I didn't. This thing chose me. And what I mean by that, and I hope I don't get choked up when I'm saying this, I'm a lawyer today, I'm a college professor today, I'm a radio show host today, I'm a newspaper columnist today, but that didn't come from me. That came from my enslaved African ancestors who resisted. That came from the civil rights activists who got beaten by white racist cops. It came from all of that, and from that I say today, to whom much is given, much is required. I'm a lawyer today because of what they did yesterday. If I wasn't avenging them today, I'd be betraying them today. I have to do what I'm doing. That's why they sent me here.
I've worked in the historic field for 25 years, and forever, I've always said it, place matters. I'm the weirdo when I go to Independence Hall, I touch the bricks on the ground, and everybody's looking at me like I'm ready to steal one of those bricks, and I am. They're 95% of them are real. I won't take it, but I touch them. And I always constantly say place matters, because when we hold on to place, we hold on to space, what we do there matters. It matters for our future, not just our past. But one thing that I know truly, and tonight just sealed the deal, place, it's not only the only thing that matters. People matter. And these three just showed it to you so clearly. It doesn't matter if you're from Philadelphia or wherever you are in the world, there's always a town, a place, a location, and the people that you need to hold on to, and you need to tell their story, and you need to gather and rally around. So thank you three so much for being the people that matter to this city, to tell our story to this nation. Thank you for making my job so easy tonight. Thank you, everybody. Give them a huge round of applause.